The void between galaxies was never truly empty. Humans had known this secret for centuries, filling the cosmic darkness with an intricate lattice of steel and determination that would become their greatest weapon. Not that Ambassador Krell could see it. The Scorrir had always been too focused on the warmth of stars to notice what lurked in the spaces between them. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, where species from across the cosmos debated the fate of worlds, Krell watched the human delegation with thinly veiled contempt. Their single planet, their obsession with primitive rail networks, their apparent lack of ambition. These were the marks of a species destined for conquest, or so he believed. It would prove to be the most expensive miscalculation in galactic history. The invasion began, as all Scorrir campaigns did, with overwhelming force. 74 carriers, each the size of a small moon, emerged from the orbital warp gate above Earth. 1,776 frigates formed an impenetrable wall of firepower. 88 million combat drones waited in their launch bays, ready to cleanse humanity from the galaxy. They found an empty planet. When the first railgun round from Luna shattered the warp gate, Krell laughed. The humans had just trapped themselves in their own system. But, as his tactical officers' mandibles began to chatter in growing horror, as the sensor readings defied every known law of warfare, as endless waves of engineering drones emerged from seemingly nowhere to systematically dismantle his fleet, Krell finally understood. This wasn't a war, this was a salvage operation, and humanity had been preparing for it since they first laid track across the stars. The first carrier died silently, its hull peeling away like petals of a metallic flower. Not from weapons fire, there were no explosions, no dramatic battles. Instead, swarms of blunt-nosed drones, more resembling industrial tools than weapons of war, methodically cut through shield generators, weapon emplacements, and hull plating. Each piece was carefully catalogued, sorted, and whisked away on invisible tracks that seemed to materialize from the void itself. "Impossible," Krell's tactical officer whispered, mandibles trembling as he watched the feed. "Their industrial capacity. One planet couldn't possibly." But Earth wasn't just one planet anymore. As the Scorrir fleet hung in high orbit, paralyzed by the unprecedented assault, the truth began to emerge. Every mountain range concealed a fabrication facility. Every ocean depth housed automated assembly lines. The entire planet had been transformed into a single, massive industrial complex, its surface crisscrossed with railways that didn't just connect cities, they connected stars. The humans had reported their military capabilities accurately, technically speaking. 6 frigates, no carriers, a smattering of orbital platforms. What they hadn't mentioned was the vast network of automated factories, the countless drone swarms that could be assembled in minutes, or the fact that their entire civilization had evolved beyond the need for traditional warships. Deep in the command center of Lunar Base Alpha, supply chain engineer Sarah Chen watched the battle unfold with the detached interest of someone monitoring a particularly complex logistics operation. Her fingers danced across holographic displays, adjusting production quotas and redirecting salvage flows. To her, the greatest space battle in galactic history was simply another day at work. "Efficiency report," she called out, not looking up from her station. "How are we doing on the tungsten recycling?" Her AI assistant's response was immediate. "Salvage teams are achieving 98.2% material recovery. The Scorrir's hull alloys are proving particularly useful for our Andromeda Spur expansion project. However, we're noting some quality issues with their Singularity core containment systems." Sarah made a note in her log. The Scorrir, for all their military might, had always prioritized quantity over quality. Their Singularity cores would need significant refinement before they could be repurposed as locomotive engines for the Void trains. Above them, the battle, if it could be called that, continued its inexorable progression. Krell watched helplessly as his mighty fleet was dismantled piece by piece. The drones worked with terrible efficiency, stripping away weapons systems first, then propulsion, leaving life support for last. They weren't killing the Scorrir crews. They were simply reclaiming the ships around them, leaving the occupants in intact bubbles of habitability that grew smaller by the minute. In the vast darkness between Mars and Jupiter, something even more extraordinary was taking place. The salvage materials weren't being transported back to Earth or Luna. Instead, they were being fed directly into massive mobile factories, Trains, kilometers long, that never stopped moving, never needed to dock. These behemoths consumed raw materials at one end and extruded finished products from the other, all while maintaining their relentless velocity along tracks that existed in dimensions the Scorrir had never thought to explore. Sir, Krell's communications officer interrupted his horrified contemplation. We're receiving a schedule. On every screen across the dying fleet, in perfect Scorrir script, appeared a timetable. Now departing, Sol System Central Hub Track 7, Express Service to Andromeda, Construction Zone. Please mind the gap between the galaxy and the void. Expected arrival 15 minutes. Note, this service includes complimentary salvage operations. The message blinked mockingly on Krell's command screen as his flagship shuddered, not from weapons fire, but from the methodical deconstruction happening along its spine. Through the observation dome, he watched in mute horror as sections of his own ship disappeared into the maws of processing units that rode along tracks seemingly suspended in empty space. Combat, ineffective, the tactical AI announced, with a hint of what might have been confusion. Unable to compute enemy force strength. Query, when does a train become a weapon system? When does infrastructure become military capacity? Requesting parameters update. But there would be no update. The AI, like its Scorrir masters, was attempting to quantify war through traditional metrics. Fleet strengths, weapon yields, fighter squadrons. They had never considered that humanity's greatest weapon was their supply chain. In the depths of Lunar Base Alpha, Sarah Chen's team had shifted into high gear. Holographic displays showed material flow rates that would have seemed impossible to any conventional military strategist. Entire carrier groups were being broken down into their component elements, reformed and repurposed in real time. Track laying efficiency is up 12%, her assistant reported. The new Scorrir alloys are exceeding specifications. At current rates, we'll reach the Andromeda construction zone ahead of schedule. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Send a memo to engineering. Tell them to start planning the Triangulum extension. We're going to have surplus materials. Above Earth, the battle had transformed into something that defied traditional military doctrine. Scorrir ships hung in space like gutted fish, their crews trapped in shrinking bubbles of atmosphere as drones systematically harvested everything around them. The humans hadn't fired a single shot. They didn't need to. Their industrial machinery was weapon enough. In his rapidly diminishing command center, Krell received another message. Attention valued contributors. Your materials have been selected for inclusion in the Transgalactic Railway Initiative. Current project, Andromeda Spur, Section 7B. Your sacrifice furthers the connection of all spaces between spaces. Thank you for choosing human railways for your involuntary donation needs. The message was followed by a children's song, broadcast on all frequencies. Click click through the black, laying ties on cosmic tracks. What's ahead, what's behind, just the rails for us to find. When the stars are far apart, that's where human railways start. In the void so dark and deep, watch our trains their schedule keep. The song echoed through the dying remnants of Krell's fleet, a haunting melody that seemed to mock everything the Scorrir had believed about warfare, about space, about humanity itself. But it wasn't meant as mockery. To the humans it was simply their reality, as natural as breathing. In the observation bubble of what remained of his flagship, Krell watched a peculiar scene unfold. A human child, no more than 10 years old, stood pressed against the window of a passing train car, drawing patterns in the condensation with her finger. She wore overalls covered in engineering equations and a cap with Junior Track Layer emblazoned across it. Her eyes met his, and she waved cheerfully before returning to her doodling. The sight broke something in Krell's militant mind. "They brought their children to a war zone," he whispered. "Correction," his AI responded, its voice distorting as parts of its processing core were carefully extracted by maintenance drones. "Evidence suggests this is not a war zone. Analysis indicates this is a standard human construction site. Children appear to be part of normal operations." Through the viewport, Krell could see more trains now, massive constructions that stretched for kilometers. Some were clearly mobile factories, others appeared to be housing units, schools, hospitals, entire cities in motion, never needing to stop as they harvested resources and laid tracks simultaneously. The humans hadn't evacuated their population in fear of the Scorrir fleet. They had simply continued their normal operations. In one of these moving cities, Sarah Chen was having lunch with her daughter in their observation car apartment. The wall-sized windows offered a spectacular view of the ongoing salvage operation. "Oma," her daughter asked, pointing at a partially deconstructed Scorrir frigate, "why did they build their ships so inefficiently? Look at all that wasted space in the hull design." Sarah smiled, pleased at her daughter's developing engineering insight. "They built for war, sweetheart. We build for permanence. Speaking of which, how's your track mathematics coming along?" The girl brightened, pulling out a tablet covered in complex spatial calculations. "I figured out how to reduce void drift by 3% by adjusting the rail curvature through four-dimensional space. Want to see?" Before Sarah could respond, her comm unit chimed. "Ms. Chen, we're detecting unusual material compositions in Carrier Group 3. Their singularity cores appear to be military-grade. Possibility for upgrade to the express line engines." The logistics of managing an entire civilization on the move had long since ceased to be remarkable to Sarah. She pulled up the relevant data streams, her daughter leaning in with professional interest. "Good catch. Reroute those calls to R&D and check if any of their quantum stabilizers are compatible with the new Carina Spur project." Meanwhile, in what remained of the Scorrir command center, Krell received the final insult, a job offer. "Dear valued resource provider, Human Railways is currently seeking experienced military personnel for retraining as void transit controllers. Your strategic planning skills and experience with large-scale operations make you an ideal candidate for our expanding network. Benefits include competitive salary in refined materials, comprehensive void health coverage, family relocation to any station along our 47 million light-year network, advanced education opportunities in non-Euclidean track laying, regular shuttle service to remaining Scorrir territories, subject to track availability. Please note, acceptance of this offer is mandatory as your current vessel is scheduled for complete conversion within the next 3.7 hours. Welcome aboard." Krell stared at the job offer until the screen itself was carefully removed by a maintenance drone, leaving the text hovering in a holographic projection. The methodical dismantling of his command center had reached the point where only his chair and immediate surroundings remained intact, suspended in a bubble of atmosphere maintained by human engineering that he was beginning to grudgingly admire. Through the shrinking window of his command bubble, he watched a scene that redefined his understanding of scale. A train emerged from what appeared to be empty space, its length defying comprehension. As it passed, a process that took nearly an hour, he saw it was segmented into distinct zones: manufacturing districts, residential areas, entertainment complexes, and at its heart, a massive university campus where humans studied the art of binding space together with steel and determination. "Final structural integrity warning," his AI announced, its voice now coming from a small portable unit that a drone had thoughtfully placed on his armrest. "Remaining command center mass, 2.3%. Recommended action, except pending employment offer." A child's voice cut through his communications system. "Attention passengers, the 15:30 service to Andromeda Construction Zone 7 will be departing shortly from Platform Void 9. This service includes stops at the Orion Spur Educational Complex, Sagittarius A Engineering Hub, and the Magellan Cloud Junction. Please ensure all salvaged materials are properly sorted before boarding." In the distance, Krell watched as his fleet's worth of material was already being transformed. Carrier hulls became railway ties that stretched into impossible dimensions. Frigate armor plating was reconstructed into the skeletal frameworks of new stations. Even the quantum cores of his ships were being carefully repurposed as power sources for the endless trains that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "Sir?" His AI spoke again. "I believe you should see this." The holographic display shifted to show a view of Earth that defied explanation. The planet's surface was transforming, mountains folding away like origami, oceans parting to reveal vast mechanical complexes. The entire planet was a machine, a construction yard on a scale that made his fleet look like children's toys. But it was what lay beneath that truly broke him. Below the surface infrastructure, extending down to the planet's core, was an intricate lattice of tracks that didn't just run through space, but through time itself. Humanity hadn't just mastered space travel, they'd turned their entire civilization into a four-dimensional transport network. a new message appeared in his rapidly shrinking command space. Orientation session for new employees begins in 5 minutes. Please prepare for temporal shift. Note: time dilation effects are normal during initial track-laying training. Remember our motto: every moment is a station, every station a journey. The temporal shift hit Krell like a wave of vertigo. His remaining command bubble seemed to stretch and compress, the stars outside smearing into lines of light that curved in impossible ways. When his vision cleared, he found himself standing, or rather floating, in what appeared to be a vast classroom suspended in the void between galaxies. Other former Scorrir commanders floated nearby, their mandibles clicking in confused communication. The instructor, a human woman who couldn't have been more than 30 Earthwinds old, wrote complex equations in the air using nothing but her finger, leaving trails of light that formed into mathematical proofs for concepts Krell had never imagined. "Welcome to Basic Track Theory 101, she announced cheerfully. "I'm Dr. Zhang, and I'll be your instructor for the next subjective week. Today's lesson: why straight lines don't exist in void space, and how we exploit that fact for efficient rail laying." She gestured to a window that seemed to open onto multiple time periods simultaneously. "As you can see, your former fleet is currently being integrated into the Andromeda Express line. Don't worry about the temporal discontinuity, you're watching both the past and future construction simultaneously. It's easier to understand track laying when you can see all 4 dimensions at once." Through the multi-temporal window, Krell watched in fascination as his mighty invasion force was transformed into something far more impressive. The massive carriers, once the pride of the Scorrir fleet, were being unwound like spools of thread, their atomic structure carefully reorganized into impossibly long rails that curved through dimensions he could barely perceive. "Now," Dr. Zheng continued, "can anyone tell me why we use Scorrir battle steel for our void-crossing rails? Anyone? No?" She smiled. "It's because your military engineers accidentally created the perfect alloy for quantum state track laying. You were so focused on making it weapons grade that you never realized its true potential. The crystalline structure, when properly reoriented, naturally aligns with the quantum foam of space-time." A small girl in overalls, the same one Krell had seen earlier, floated into the classroom carrying what appeared to be a model train set. "Mum," she called to Dr. Zhang, "the temporal harmonics in Section 7B are showing a 0.003% variance. Can I fix it?" "Peter, class sweetheart, why don't you show our new students your science project while I finish the lecture?" The girl's face lit up as she set her model train on an invisible track in the air. To Krell's amazement, the tiny train began to lay its own track as it moved, each miniature rail splitting into multiple probability states that somehow all existed simultaneously. "It's a basic probability engine," the girl explained proudly. "It lays track through all possible futures at once, then collapses the quantum state into the most efficient route. Want to see how it works?" The tiny train in the girl's demonstration began to multiply, each copy taking a slightly different path through the void space of the classroom. The copies themselves spawned more copies, creating a fractal pattern of possibilities that made Krell's compound eyes ache. But instead of chaos, the proliferating trains began to form a coherent pattern, a web of interconnected routes that somehow made perfect sense when viewed from what the humans called metaspace. "The trick," the girl explained, her hands moving through the holographic display with practiced ease, "is understanding that space isn't empty. It's more like a fabric with infinite pockets. We don't build tracks through space. We convince space to want our tracks there." Dr. Zhang beamed at her daughter before turning back to her bewildered class. "This is why traditional military strategy failed against our railway network. You can't destroy something that exists in multiple probability states simultaneously. Every time you target a track, it's already shifted to another quantum state." Through another temporal window, Krell watched as his own flagship's quantum core was carefully extracted and repurposed. The humans weren't just building a transportation network. They were stitching the very fabric of space-time into a navigable grid. Each rail line existed in multiple dimensions at once, allowing trains to take shortcuts through probability itself. A new voice echoed through the classroom, the same automated announcement system that had been haunting Krell since the battle began. Now arriving at Educational Platform 7, the 1545 Historical Express from Sol System, today's interactive exhibit, The Last Great Military Invasion and the Birth of Transgalactic Rail, Please mind the temporal wake when disembarking. The arriving train car materialized through what appeared to be a fold in reality itself. Its windows showed scenes from multiple time periods simultaneously: the initial Scorrir invasion, the current salvage operation, and what appeared to be future construction projects spanning between galaxies. For homework, Dr. Zhang announced as temporal distortion signals indicated the end of the lesson. Please solve the following problem. If a train leaves Alpha Centauri at relative velocity c, laying probability track through 7-dimensional spaces, and another train leaves Andromeda carrying reformed Scorrir battle steel at translight velocity, where and when will they meet to form the new Triangulum Express hub? The girl raised her hand excitedly. Ooh, is this about the paradox junction we're building next week? Or is it last week? Time gets so fuzzy around the construction zones. Krell found himself staring at the homework problem with an intensity that would have surprised his former war council. The mathematics involved weren't just complex, they fundamentally challenged everything he had believed about the nature of reality. The girl, who had introduced herself as Luna Zhang, was already sketching out solutions in the air using probability vectors that existed in multiple states simultaneously. The trick, Luna explained, noticing his fascination, is to stop thinking of time as a line and space as a container. Here, watch. She pulled a small model train from her pocket and set it running through her mathematical constructs. As it moved, it left behind not physical tracks, but equations that solved themselves. See, the trains don't just travel through space, she continued, her small fingers tracing the path of her demonstration model. They travel through possibility. Every rail line is actually infinite rail lines collapsed into the most efficient probability state. That's why you couldn't destroy our infrastructure. You were only ever seeing one possible version of it. Through the classroom's reality windows, Krell watched as his former fleet continued its transformation. The massive carriers, once symbols of Scorrir military might, were being unwound into their quantum components and rewoven into something far more sophisticated. Each atom was being carefully repositioned to align with what the humans called probability matrices, points where multiple realities intersected. Dr. Zhang's voice cut through his contemplation. For those struggling with the homework, remember the third law of void railways. Time is merely another track to lay. The real question isn't where two trains will meet, but rather how many quantum states they'll occupy simultaneously during construction. A new announcement echoed through the classroom. Attention students, the practical demonstration of multi-dimensional track laying will begin in 5 minutes/last week/next century. Please adjust your temporal perception accordingly. Chronological protection helmets are available for species not yet adapted to probability travel. Luna tugged at Krell's sleeve. Want to see something really cool? Mum's letting me help design the new Triangulum Express hub. It exists in 14 dimensions at once and serves refreshments in all of them. The classroom shifted, its walls becoming transparent to reveal a construction site that defied conventional physics. Massive trains, their lengths measured in light years rather than meters, moved through intersecting probability fields, each carriage existing in multiple states simultaneously. What appeared at first glance to be chaos slowly resolved itself into a pattern of breathtaking complexity. Luna's model train had grown more sophisticated, now projecting a miniature version of the construction site. "This is my favorite part," she said, her eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "Watch what happens when we introduce temporal harmonics to the track-laying process." The demonstration showed trains moving backwards through time to lay track for themselves, creating stable loops in causality that somehow didn't violate paradox laws. Krell's military training had included advanced physics, but this was something else entirely, engineering that treated the fundamental laws of reality as mere suggestions. The quantum entanglement of the rail network, Dr. Zhang explained, noting Krell's bewildered expression, allows us to treat time as a construction material. Each track exists in all possible moments simultaneously until observed, which means our trains are actually traveling through probability clouds rather than physical space. Through the temporal windows, Krell watched as his former flagship's quantum core was integrated into this impossible network. The humans weren't destroying his fleet. They were elevating it to a higher purpose, transforming weapons of war into tools of connection. A new announcement reverberated through multiple timelines simultaneously. Now departing. Platform Infinity, track probability 7 express service to all possible futures. Please ensure your temporal coordinates are properly aligned. Note, passengers experiencing causality sickness should report to the nearest quantum medical bay, located in all time periods simultaneously. The announcement faded into a harmonic hum as a train, longer than any Scorrir battle fleet, materialized through what appeared to be a fold in reality. Its carriages stretched through multiple dimensions, each section existing in several quantum states at once. Krell watched as passengers boarded and disembarked simultaneously across different time periods, their movements choreographed in a dance of probability. "That's the Infinity Express," Luna explained, her model train now projecting a complex series of intersecting timelines. "It's my favorite route because it never actually starts or ends. It just is. Mum says it's the perfect example of fourth-dimensional engineering." The Zhang nodded approvingly at her daughter's explanation. "The Infinity Express serves as both our main transport line and a temporal stabilizer for the entire network. Each journey creates and maintains the very tracks it runs on across all possible timelines." Through the classroom's reality windows, Krell observed as sections of his former fleet were integrated into this impossible transit system. Scorrir battle steel, once forged for destruction, was being reborn as quantum state rail lines that curved through dimensions he was only beginning to comprehend. A maintenance drone floated past, carefully adjusting what appeared to be the fabric of space-time itself. Its designation tag read, Probability Maintenance Unit, 47B, and below that, in smaller text, "Today's special, paradox resolution and temporal track polishing. Your homework," Dr. Zhang announced, "will require hands-on experience with basic probability manipulation. Please observe." She gestured, and the classroom itself began to shift, transforming into a practical workshop where multiple versions of reality overlapped like pages in a book. The workshop materialized around them, a space that seemed to exist in multiple phases at once. Tools hung in the air, each one simultaneously new, worn, and yet to be created. Student workstations appeared as probability clouds, each containing infinite possible configurations until someone chose to interact with them. "Today's practical exercise," Dr. Zhang announced, "will focus on basic track laying through quantum probability fields. Luna, would you demonstrate the starter technique?" Luna stepped forward, her small hands moving with practiced confidence through the quantum foam of space-time. She pulled what looked like a simple toy train from her pocket, but as she set it down, Krell realized it was anything but simple. The tiny engine began to multiply, each copy slightly out of phase with the others, creating a cascade of probability tracks that spread through the workshop like ripples in a pond. "The secret," Luna explained, noticing Krell's fascinated gaze, "is to let the train decide where it wants to go. We don't build the tracks. We just help probability collapse into the most efficient configuration." Through the workshop's reality windows, Krell watched as his former fleet continued its transformation. A carrier's quantum core was being carefully unwound, its military-grade containment systems repurposed into probability anchors for new track sections. The sight of such powerful weapons being turned into infrastructure should have been humiliating, but Krell found himself increasingly intrigued by the elegant efficiency of it all. A new announcement echoed through multiple probability states. "Engineering alert. Temporal convergence detected in Sector 7G. All probability trains, please adjust your quantum states accordingly. Time spillage cleanup crews are standing by in all possible futures." The Satan smiled at her students' confused expressions. "And that, class, is why we always check our temporal harmonics before laying new track. Now, who would like to try their hand at basic probability manipulation?" Luna's model train had created a web of intersecting probability tracks that now filled the workshop space, each line glowing with potential futures. The other former Scorrir commanders watched in stunned silence as she demonstrated how to collapse quantum states into stable rail configurations. "The really interesting part," Luna continued, her fingers dancing through holographic probability clouds, "is how we handle intersections. Watch what happens when two probability streams meet." She adjusted something in her model, and suddenly two miniature trains approached each other from different temporal vectors. Instead of colliding, they passed through one another, each occupying the same space-time coordinates, but in different quantum states. The resulting pattern looked like a complex knot tied in reality itself. That's how we achieve our network density, Dr. Zhang explained, expanding the demonstration to show the larger system. Every point in space-time can host multiple tracks simultaneously, each operating in its own probability state. It's why your fleet's sensors couldn't get accurate readings. They were trying to measure one reality when we operate in all of them. Through the workshop windows, Krell observed a practical application of this principle. A massive void train was passing through what appeared to be solid matter, the remnants of his flagship, as salvage drones worked in multiple phases simultaneously. The train wasn't avoiding the material, it was simply existing in a different probability state. A maintenance notification flickered through various realities. Attention, probability leak detected in training section 3. Reality, stabilizers engaging. Please maintain your temporal coherence until quantum harmonics are restored. Remember, a phase-shifted worker is a safe worker. Luna's hand shot up. Oh, can I show them how we fix probability leaks? I've been practicing with my junior maintenance kit. Luna pulled what looked like a child's toolbox from her overalls, but when she opened it, Krell saw it contained miniature versions of the same reality warping devices that were currently dismantling his fleet. Each tool existed in multiple states simultaneously, their quantum uncertainties creating a shimmer in the air around them. First, she explained, pulling out what appeared to be a probability wrench. We have to identify which timeline is leaking. She held the tool up to the distortion, and its indicators spun through multiple dimensions before settling on a reading. See? This one's bleeding future states into past probabilities. That's why everything looks sort of smeared. The leak was visible now, a sort of iridescent tear in reality, where different temporal states were mixing inappropriately. Around it, trains from different timelines were automatically adjusting their quantum phases to avoid the disturbance, their paths weaving through probability space like threads through a cosmic loom. Dr. Zhang watched proudly as her daughter began the repair procedure. Notice how she's using the natural quantum harmonics of the track system to stabilize the leak. This is why we always build redundancy into our probability matrices. Through the temporal windows, Krell could see the larger implications of this technology. His fleet hadn't just been defeated, it had been rendered obsolete by a civilization that treated the laws of physics as mere engineering guidelines. The humans hadn't built a transportation network, they'd created a way to manipulate reality itself. A new announcement rippled through the quantum foam. Schedule update. The 1630 service to alternative timeline 7B will be delayed by approximately -3 minutes due to probability maintenance. We apologize for the temporal inconvenience. Passengers are reminded that experiencing multiple versions of themselves at the transfer station is completely normal. Luna's probability wrench twisted through dimensions Krell couldn't quite perceive, each turn causing ripples in the fabric of space-time. The leak began to seal itself, reality knitting back together as quantum states realigned themselves. The process looked less like repair and more like teaching reality how to behave properly. The really neat part, Luna said, making a final adjustment, is how the tracks remember their proper configuration. See? She pointed to where the probability lines were reorganizing themselves, flowing like liquid mathematics into more stable patterns. They're not just rails anymore, they're more like guidelines for how reality should work. Daizang, Dr. Zhang stepped forward, expanding the demonstration to show the larger network. The classroom's walls dissolved, revealing a vast web of interconnected probability streams that stretched between galaxies. Each line represented not just a physical track, but a whole series of potential realities collapsed into their most efficient state. This, she gestured to a particularly complex intersection, is why traditional military strategy failed against our network. You can't destroy something that exists in all possible states until observed. The moment any weapon targeted our infrastructure, it simply shifted to a probability state where the attack missed. Through the temporal windows, Krell watched as this principle was being applied to his former fleet. The Scorrir ships weren't just being dismantled, they were being unraveled through probability space, their very atoms reorganized into patterns that served the railway's needs. Each piece existed simultaneously in multiple states until it found its most useful configuration. A new service announcement echoed through quantum space. Now boarding on platform. The transport possibility expressed to all possible futures. Special notice. Today's journey will include a live demonstration of paradox resolution. Passengers are reminded that meeting their future/past selves is included in the standard fare. Please ensure your temporal insurance is up to date. Luna's repair work had attracted an audience. Other former Scorrir commanders floated closer, their compound eyes reflecting the quantum manipulations with growing fascination. One of them, a tactical officer Krell recognized from the 3rd Battle Group, raised an appendage in what had become the standard gesture for asking questions. If the tracks exist in multiple states, the officer clicked hesitantly, how do you prevent temporal collisions between trains? Luna's face lit up at the question. She reached into her probability toolbox and pulled out what appeared to be a miniature signal box. As she activated it, tiny holograms of trains appeared, each one trailing threads of possibility behind it, like luminous contrails. That's the clever bit, she said, manipulating the display. Each train carries its own probability field. When 2 trains approach the same space-time coordinates, she demonstrated, bringing 2 trains together. Instead of colliding, they phased through each other, their probability fields automatically adjusting to prevent paradox. They sort of decide between themselves which reality to occupy. It's like a quantum dance. Dr. Zhang nodded approvingly. This is why our network can handle infinite traffic density. Every point in space-time can host as many trains as needed, each operating in its own probability state. The real challenge isn't avoiding collisions, it's maintaining coherent passenger states during transfers. Through the workshop windows they watched as this principle was demonstrated on a cosmic scale. A salvage train, kilometers long, passed directly through what remained of a Scorrir carrier, both objects occupying the same space but in different quantum states. The carrier was being systematically deconstructed by drones that shifted between realities, each component sorted and categorized before being fed into the probability stream. A new announcement rippled through the quantum phone. Engineering notice, reality harmonics, maintenance in progress. Section 7G through K will experience temporary probability fluctuations. Passengers may briefly exist in superposition. Please maintain your assigned quantum state until probability normalization is complete. The announcement had barely faded when the workshop itself began to experience the probability fluctuations. The walls rippled like heat waves, each surface existing in multiple states simultaneously. For a moment, Krell found himself experiencing several versions of the same lecture, each slightly different, before reality settled back into a single coherent stream. And that, Luna said cheerfully, seemingly unaffected by the temporal distortion, is why we always carry probability anchors, here. She reached into her toolbox and pulled out what looked like a simple pendant. These help you maintain quantum coherence during fluctuations, otherwise you might find yourself teaching the class instead of taking it. Dr. Zhang expanded the demonstration area, revealing a vast holographic display of the entire railway network. Probability streams flowed between galaxies like rivers of light, each one carrying countless trains through different layers of reality. Today's advanced lesson, she announced, will cover multidimensional junction design. Pay particular attention to how we handle probability cascade effects at major intersections. The display zoomed in on a massive hub where hundreds of probability tracks converged. Trains flowed through it like water through a complex fountain, each one shifting through multiple states to avoid temporal interference. What looked like chaos at first glance revealed itself to be an intricate dance of quantum mechanics and engineering precision. A maintenance drone drifted past, its diagnostic displays showing the complex mathematics of reality manipulation. Its designation tag now read, Probability Maintenance Unit 47B, Specialist in Paradox Resolution and Temporal Track Realignment. Today's task, Quantum State Optimization for Transgalactic Express Routes. Through the temporal windows, Krell watched as sections of his former fleet were being integrated into this impossible network. The quantum cores of Scorrir warships, once used to power weapons that could shatter planets, were being repurposed as probability anchors for new track sections. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very technology they had developed for destruction was now being used to connect the cosmos. A new service update echoed through the quantum phone. Attention passengers on the Infinity Loop Express. Due to temporal engineering works, your journey may experience quantum state variations. Today's probability of arrival 100% plus %. Remember, you're not late until all possible versions of you miss their connection. Luna's fingers danced through the holographic display, adjusting probability streams with the casual expertise of someone born to the task. The really interesting part, she said, manipulating a particularly complex junction, is how we handle temporal feedback loops. Watch what happens when I introduce a paradox. She deliberately crossed two probability streams that should have cancelled each other out. Instead of causing a catastrophic collapse, the tracks simply reorganized themselves into a more stable configuration, creating what looked like a Mobius strip through space-time. That's why we use Scorrir battle steel, she explained, noting Krell's amazed expression. Its quantum structure is perfect for probability manipulation. Your engineers designed it to resist temporal distortion during faster-than-light combat, but we found it works even better as a foundation for trans-dimensional track laying. Zhang stepped in, expanding the demonstration to show the larger implications. The Scorrir Empire built weapons, she said, her voice gentle but firm. We build connections. Your fleet's quantum cores aren't being destroyed, they're being awakened to their true potential. Through the workshop windows they could see this transformation in action. A massive salvage train was passing through multiple realities simultaneously, its carriages existing in different quantum states as it collected and processed the remnants of the Scorrir fleet. Each piece of military hardware was being carefully unraveled at the atomic level, its structure reorganized into something far more sophisticated. A new maintenance alert pulsed through the probability field. Notice, quantum harmonics, optimization in progress, reality cohesion level, 97.3% and all other possible percentages. Please maintain your designated probability state. Remember, a well-maintained timeline is a happy timeline. Luna's final demonstration caused the entire workshop to transform into a vast temporal observatory. The walls dissolved completely, revealing the true scope of humanity's railway empire. What had once seemed like mere tracks between stars now revealed itself as an intricate web of probability streams, binding the universe together. Each line representing billions of possible realities, collapsed into perfect efficiency. And this, she said, her young voice filled with pride as she gestured to a particular nexus of probability streams, is where we're building the new Triangulum Express Hub. It'll connect 3 galaxies simultaneously through 17 dimensions of probability space. We're using your flagship's quantum core as the primary reality anchor. Krell watched as his mighty warship, once the pride of the Scorrir fleet, completed its transformation. Its weapons became probability stabilizers, its armor transformed into tracks that curved through dimensions he was only beginning to comprehend. The humans hadn't just defeated his military, they had elevated it to something far greater. The classroom shifted one last time, resolving into what appeared to be a station platform suspended in the void between galaxies. A massive train materialized through multiple layers of reality, its length measured in light years, its carriages existing in several quantum states simultaneously. The 1730 Transgalactic Express to all possible futures is now boarding, announced a cheerful voice through probability space. Today's special service includes temporal sightseeing of the former Scorrir fleet's integration into the Universal Railway Network. Please maintain your assigned quantum state during boarding. Dr. Zhang handed Krell a conductor's cap that seemed to exist in multiple realities at once. Welcome to the railway, she said with a smile. There's always room for those who want to help build connections rather than barriers. As Krell placed the cap on his head, he understood finally what the humans had known all along. The void between stars wasn't empty, it was just waiting for the right engineers to come along and lay down tracks through probability itself. The age of war was over. The age of the eternal railway had begun. Through the station's probability windows, he watched as humanity's trains continued their endless journey, binding the cosmos together one quantum track at a time, turning the darkness between stars into the greatest transportation network reality had ever known. If you enjoyed this journey through quantum railways and probability space, don't forget to quantum entangle with our channel. Hit that subscribe button faster than a transgalactic express train, smash the like button across all possible realities, and make sure to activate that notification bell to stay synchronized with all our temporal uploads. Leave a comment below sharing which probability stream you'd like to explore next, and remember, as we say on the Infinity Express, every station is just the beginning of another amazing journey. Join our growing community of void travelers and railway enthusiasts across all dimensions of space-time. Until our next departure, keep those probability tracks running smooth.